The next panel is Charles Davidson, who's with the New York Law School. Robert Puckett from the New York State Telecom Association. Rich Carnes, who is from the Songwriters Guild of Arts and of America, Arts and Labs. And Gordon Chambers. Whomever would like to start. I know there's an additional songwriter. That's fine. We love songwriters. So whomever would like to begin.
Since I'm closest to the mic, I'll start first.
Great.
In the interest of time, I'll keep my remarks short. We have a large panel here. My name is Bob Puckett. I'm with the New York State Telecommunications Association. My members, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and many of the other telecommunications carriers across the state. I'm here today on behalf of my membership to oppose the resolution. Certainly, comments have been made about how great the Internet is, and that's what makes America, etc. And we've also discussed and heard about the Googles of the world, the Facebooks, and even a lady who wanted to be a superhero on the Internet. Well, it's all happened without regulation of the Internet. And now is not the time to start imposing regulation on the Internet. And certainly, my members are investing heavily in the network. Verizon was not on the hook to invest billions in New York City. They made that decision because of the fierce competitive marketplace we now have between my members, the traditional telephone companies, and the cable TV providers in the state. It's not a question of being on the hook, it's a decision they made to be competitive. And they've lost half of their market share in the landline business. So I don't know if that quite qualifies as a monopoly anymore, but that's the status of our industry today. So certainly we oppose the resolution, and while we are fierce competitors with the cable TV industry, my members... I
had no idea.
I certainly echo the comments made by the panel earlier from their representation. As the one gentleman commented, what these rules actually do would cause you to build yourself out of congestion. And thinking about it, somebody mentioned earlier the Internet, the highway, the information superhighway. Well, that's exactly what it is. And no different than vehicular highways, we need to be able to manage those highways effectively. As you know, folks manage their transportation systems. This is a transportation system. They manage it through pricing. They manage it through certain vehicles can only go on certain parts of the highway. Certain vehicles pay more. Commercial trucks pay more for highways. Why? Because they put more stresses on the network. The economic value they get out of that highway is higher. So those sorts of things are all out there and all contained in these debates about network neutrality. As providers of networks, we need to be able to manage our networks no different than anyone else manages any other networks. So with that, I'll turn it over to other panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for inviting me here today. My name is Charles Davidson. I'm the director of the Advanced Communications Law and Policy Institute at New York Law School. In my former life, I was commissioner on the Florida Public Service Commission. The ACLP's focus over the past 2 years has been on broadband. Our research has found pervasive gaps between broadband adopters and non-adopters. For example, we've got approximately 38 million seniors in the United States, but only about 30% of them have adopted broadband at home. There are approximately 50 million people with disabilities in the United States, but only about 25% have adopted broadband at home. Less than half of African American adults in households earning less than $20,000 a year have adopted broadband at home. And while the number of school children using broadband is increasing, the number of educators who have incorporated it into the classroom is still really low. So increasing the adoption rate is essential because of the truly transformative nature of this technology, and it's hard to really address that in just a couple of minutes. We've submitted a report to the FCC on barriers to broadband adoption, and it's before you, and it's just broadband can do amazing things for folks. For seniors, it's being increasingly used to provide in-home medical care, remote monitoring, something I personally am looking into for my stepfather. For people with disabilities, it's a vital tool that's enabling just an array of educational and employment opportunities. And for school children, there are studies, a number of them, that have shown positive links between accessing broadband and higher academic performance. A critical component of all this has been the emergence of wireless broadband as an enabler. People with disabilities cite internet connectivity, email, and text messaging on their phone as the most important aspect. It's a critically important device for folks with disabilities. African Americans are the most avid users of mobile data services. In the energy sector, wireless broadband is going to be a part of the backbone of our nation's smart grid. Unfortunately, in the wireless sector, there's just not enough spectrum out there for innovators. The FCC predicts a fairly significant spectrum gap in the near term. As such, it's really important from our standpoint that wireless providers have the freedom to be able to manage their networks to protect against slowdowns, congestions, and outages. Physics dictates that there's just a limit to how much traffic a carrier can have on their network, but that traffic is increasing day after day. So in this environment, network management, as opposed to, say, just being a dumb pipe for sending and receiving information, really is essential to ensuring reliability. Ultimately, across the board, it's our position that network managers need the latitude to manage their networks, to do so properly, of course, but to develop protocols, traffic management protocols, and to focus on how to facilitate this increasing universe of new applications and services. So, for example, broadband telemedicine and broadband-enabled education services are bandwidth heavy, and they're growing. As a matter of social policy, we need to make sure that those applications can be prioritized where needed. At that point in time, for example, where there's heavy network congestion or heavy traffic or other issues, I think we as a society want to ensure that the more important broadband services can remain reliable. I'd pose a question. If there's a conflict, for example, in transmitting a video-based communication between two deaf users and the download of an HD movie from Netflix or somewhere, what do we want to ensure gets priority at that point in time where we need to possibly manage the traffic? So in closing, I would urge the Council to really focus or perhaps refocus efforts on what it can do to help spur broadband adoption. I think net neutrality is in many respects a counterproductive topic that takes sort of attention away from what I think is the pressing issue of spurring broadband adoption for seniors, for people with disabilities, for minority communities, for children. And as City Council members, everyone is really uniquely positioned to take, unique action to help bring broadband to the constituents. And if you can get 1, 2, 10, 20 more folks adopting broadband in your community, you really are doing a good deed. So with that, I'll close, Madam
Thank you very much. And of course, we love Michael Santarelli. He used to sit up here. He was a staff member, so we like Michael Santarelli.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Michael does excellent work. I like him a lot. So your loss was my gain.
That's correct. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Gordon Chambers, a singer-songwriter living in Brooklyn, New York, in fact, in Letitia James's district.
You're very fortunate.
Yes, she's a great woman.
Yes.
And I have worked all over the world as a songwriter, having collaborated with artists like Anita Baker and Whitney Houston. But I'm very proud that I live in New York, because New York, of course, is where some of the greatest songs have ever been written, and where this is the cultural center, arguably, of America, if not the universe. So I've come here to really talk about an issue that's very dear and sensitive to songwriters' hearts, which is the issue of piracy, and the actual reality that piracy is really killing the ability of songwriters to effectively create our passion and make a living, and the degree that it's, this piracy exists in the landscape of the internet. So it's important that conversation be brought into any discussion around net neutrality. So I just brought some facts that I'd like to share. According to the International Federation of Phonographic Industries, in 2000, global recorded music sales were at 30 billion. By 2008, these same global sales had fallen to 18.4 billion. This 8-year period coincides with the rapid expansion of unlawful file sharing. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, songwriter incomes have dropped 32% between 2003 and 2006 alone for the lucky few who still have jobs. And every music major publisher has had to lay off at least half or sometimes all of their songwriters in 10 years since the piracy has began decimating the music industry. The unfortunate reality of this current situation is that the digital world of online piracy is rampant and undeniable and unlawful. Piracy has deeply and materially harmed the songwriter community, yet certain organizations specifically ask the FCC to prevent the companies that own these private networks from addressing the problem of piracy. Network neutrality supporters claim to want to fight piracy, yet they do not propose a viable alternative to the current legal regime that would curb the massive looting that has decimated the artistic community. Most oppose proposals to enhance criminal liability or criminal penalties for copyright pirates, and even refuse to have the internet service of the pirates temporarily suspended. Instead, they suggest that ISPs should shame them, quote unquote, with warning letters. Songwriters believe that it's foolhardy to trust the personal ethics of thieves to solve the persistent problem of illegal downloading. I and many fellow songwriter colleagues of mine choose to live in the most expensive city in America, New York, because we feel it's the center of great American culture. Some of the best songs in American Songbook have been first written or performed in New York, even Alicia Keys and Jay-Z. So I ask the members of this council to pay attention to what makes New York a unique and world-class city. It's the artists that live here, and we want to protect our ability to do what we love, bring this passion that we have to the world, and continue to live in New York. So please, we ask that you don't sell us out for the Silicon chip technology industry out west. Protect us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's great. Who's next?
Good morning. My name is Phil Galdston, and I'm just one of thousands of songwriters who not only give New York its justly deserved title of arts capital of the world, but who contribute significantly to its economy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition to current proposals by the FCC to expand and codify certain network neutrality principles. Given the poor policy choices made by the FCC in its current proposed regulation, I strongly urge the Council to avoid any endorsement of Resolution 712A. Mr. Chambers, my colleague and collaborator, has testified how digital looters have severely damaged the music industry, and the songwriting profession in particular. It's the belief of the songwriting community that the current proposed FCC rule would worsen the situation by creating a legal safe harbor for those who steal valuable intellectual property and preventing network operators from taking actions to prevent such misconduct from occurring on the networks they own. I think the key point here is that the FCC is proposing to enshrine forever rules governing the Internet that are responsible for the devastation Mr. Chambers has just described. And it's important to note that while these rules require that all lawful uses be treated in, quote, a non-discriminatory manner, they ignore whether or not the usage is unlawful. The tragic result is that the property created and owned by songwriters like me is discriminated against, and this is anything but neutral. Comments to the FCC have clearly illustrated that 70% of the volume of traffic on broadband networks is peer-to-peer, file sharing generated by just 5% of the network's users. What's more, an astonishing 90% or more of such traffic represents unlawful theft of copyrighted works. The current situation, which permits a small percentage of looters to control a vast majority of a communication network's bandwidth for the purpose of committing illegal acts, is simply unacceptable to songwriters, and we believe it should be unacceptable to anyone who respects the rule of law, including lawmakers. The FCC's efforts to perpetuate this system, which it should be noted are causing frequent and significant slowdowns in service to the law-abiding users they purport to represent, is difficult to fathom. Now, songwriters love the First Amendment. We thrive on it. We couldn't be here without it. But we're looking to anyone who can help combat the outrage of unauthorized and illegal use of our work. At the same time, we care deeply about our audience. While creating a new song can be very personal, In many cases, we write as much for our audience as for ourselves. Therefore, we're committed to helping to forge solutions that protect our rights and those of music lovers. The greatest risk of harm to our audience, the consumers of music, comes from regulatory and legislative proposals, such as those of the FCC, that prevent responsible ISPs from managing their networks. If ISPs are unable to do so, or if they have no economic incentive to do so, music makers will continue to suffer from a loss of income and a drastic reduction in opportunity. And our audience will suffer as my colleagues and I, many of us creating right here in New York, find it no longer viable to make a living as songwriters. Although technology created the illegal file sharing monster we face every day, technology can be developed and employed to detect and deter those practices that are illegal. Simply put, in the same way American society wages war on other illegal behaviors, we must fight technology with technology. Unfortunately, the current net neutrality regulatory proposals would smother any effort to use technology to deter the rampant looting of the work of songwriters. So I hope this Council will pause before endorsing these rules and consider their impact on songwriters, music lovers, and the City of New York. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the Council, thank you for the opportunity to share with you the concerns of songwriters about the proposals by the FCC to impose network neutrality regulations on the Internet. My name is Rick Carnes, and I'm a professional songwriter and the president of the Songwriters Guild of America. The SGA is the oldest and largest national association of songwriters. We were founded right here in New York back in 1931. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Arts and Labs Coalition, of which SGA is a founding member. I will begin my remarks by saying that in order for broadband networks to be as healthy as a platform of commerce as the railroads and energy utility companies were in the past, the standard rules of commerce must be acknowledged and protected. These standard rules of commerce include respect for property, the discouragement of theft of property by users of the platform, and meaningful remedies in the event that theft occurs. The Internet does not currently recognize or enforce these standard rules of commerce. The Internet today is like a cyber Somalia, where pirates run rampant as hordes of anonymous looters commit the greatest theft of intellectual property in all of recorded history, costing thousands of American jobs, not just for songwriters, but for the entire American creative community, a great portion of which resides right here in New York City, our nation's cultural capital. And I'm saying that even though I'm from Nashville. Unfortunately, the proponents of network neutrality principles simply ask for more of the same Internet, with perhaps even greater restrictions on the ability of network operators and users of the network to enforce the standard rules of commerce. Of the 6 so-called network neutrality rules the FCC has put forward, I wish to limit my comments today to only 2 of the rules, one existing and one proposed rule. The first existing rule states consumers are entitled to access to the lawful content of their choice. Unfortunately, this rule entirely ignores the fact that Internet users are also able to freely access the unlawful content of their choice. The intent of this rule is good in that it ensures that our fans will be able to have unfettered access to our music. But we see no evidence that consumers are having any problem accessing legal content on the Internet. In fact, there's more legal content online today than we could have even imagined 10 years ago, and at a price of 99 cents or less, which is less than a single would have been back in the 60s. So why is the FCC imposing regulations where there seems to be no problem, while ignoring the massive problem of piracy that has destroyed the jobs of more than half of the professional songwriters in America? I would like to state from personal experience that my music publisher just 10 years ago had 12 songwriters on staff full-time. We had a creative director and 2 song pluggers. That was the year that Napster began the massive looting of music on the Internet. And now that very same publisher has no songwriters, no creative director, and no song pluggers. A direct result of the current configuration of the Internet. We would also like to comment on the proposed fifth rule, which states, a provider of broadband internet access service must treat lawful content applications and the services in a non-discriminatory manner. Once again, this rule prohibits discrimination in lawful content only. This will force legal services to compete with pirate services on a level playing field, without being able to distinguish their legal products in ways that piracy cannot. Far from being non-discriminatory, this rule discriminates against my rights as a songwriter to go into the marketplace and make a deal with a network service provider to deliver my music as part of a premium service that offers better, faster, safer experiences in getting music than they would get from illegally downloaded music. For 10 years, the U.S. government hasn't moved to end the scourge of online music piracy because they haven't wanted to stifle innovation on the internet. Our lawmakers told us be patient and trust that the marketplace would find a solution for illegal downloading. It is very confusing and disappointing to now see the FCC intervene to propose regulations that would stifle those very same innovative services that might help us compete successfully against piracy. The SGA believes that the last best hope to fight piracy is for the networks to get smarter, faster, and more creative in the ways that they deliver our music. So in closing, I would like to say in their current form, both the FCC rules and Congressional House Bill 3458 would do more harm than good to the creative community. So we respectfully ask that the Council vote not to adopt Resolution 71-2A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I guess my question to the songwriters is, what if, in other words, right now the piracy is rampant, and under any net neutrality proposition, sounds like it would be just as bad. So do you have proposals that you have sent to the FCC that would enable you to get the remuneration that you so well deserve? In other words, is there something that you propose that would eliminate this piracy? Is a huge question. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, it's a horrible situation. I have
Yes.
many friends in your situation, so I know.
Yeah, good. Actually, we could propose all sorts of regulations to, to filtering, to you name it. But we're not. We agree with the Congress that technology got us in this mess, and technology can get us out. We do believe that a faster, better, safer, premium service of some sort of music being delivered in partnership with network providers, for instance, could actually help us fight piracy. We are not proposing that. What we're saying is, if you eliminate that possibility with the blunt instrument of network neutrality principles, then that would discriminate against our chances to survive. Okay?
Okay. Does anybody else want to add to that? Any of the songwriters? Okay. That's helpful. Thank you very much. Mr. Puckett, I think, you've heard some of the net neutrality supporters talk, and they're concerned that providers are going to use the network management to protect content. Obviously, video and phone services. I just was wondering, how do you respond? Because you've heard this many, many times, I'm sure, and that seems to be their main concern.
To protect content.
Oh, no, the content, your content. In other words, not you, but the video and phone services, the telecoms, they have content which is excellent, right? But we also, the net neutrality folks who have startups and, all different kinds of opportunities out there, they're worried that they won't be able to be the next opportunity to make their mark in the world. And, it's that back and forth that never goes away.
I think where we are today shows that doesn't happen with all the innovation that has occurred on the internet without network neutrality principles. Now, just so happens, it sounds like maybe the pendulum swang a little too far in that direction, according to the songwriters we're hearing from. But certainly, it's been a free and open internet to this point in time without regulation, without oversight of content. So I think the proof is in the pudding and in the history that we've seen so far.
All right, do you want to respond to that also?
But I just wanted to really add one point and a bit of a, I guess, a personal example. You know, there's always, I suppose, in the minds of some, the risk that the sky is falling in on Chicken Little, always. You know, at times, Google, with every billion it amassed, has been saying that the sky is falling in on consumers, and it hasn't happened yet. With regard to video, I think the fact that we have fairly robust competition, at least in a lot of markets, will act to deter any type of anti-competitive, practices in that regard. So if cable, for example, wanted to, somehow discriminate in its content, folks might move to DirecTV, or they might move to video services offered by Verizon, and there are new forms of competition coming onto the market. So, and here's where the personal example comes in. I had, like probably a lot of people, the premium channels on cable. You pay $30, $40 or something for a package of HBO, Encore, Showtime, etc. Well, I've dropped all that, and I actually signed up for Netflix, which is on-demand streaming videos you can watch on your TV, on your DVD player for like $8 a month, and they've got TV shows on there. They've got, the last season of Encore. They've got Sopranos, Law and Order, movies, everything. So there's so many options out there for people. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and I think that the competitive nature of the market has today acted as a good check on anti-competitive practices, and I believe that we'll continue to do that, because for the company that engages in whatever we would call the improper practice, they're going to lose customers to someone else.
Well, that's interesting, because of course the big issue is there used to be a lot of providers and now there are fewer, but the fact of the matter is what you're saying is that there's enough competition so that we have enough, even though it doesn't seem like there's the same number. You feel like there is enough competition.
Well, I do, and there might be some market variances, but this is not a market, the provisioning of, network programming, video services, phone. It's not a market that lends itself to, the 5,000 competitors that maybe we saw after the 1996 Telecommunications Act was passed. And I'll tell you, at that time, I was practicing law here in New York with a firm, and one of these, 5,000 business plans we saw come in, they were shocking. People were entering the market with no plan, seeking venture capital. They can provide this, they can do that. And we had, because I think of regulatory mandates and fiats, this development of a huge tech bubble that burst. Telecommunications firms fired people. The bubble just burst in large part because of regulation. And I think when we sort of took a step back from that and said, okay, we're going to take a light approach to regulating broadband and new services, we see the market, re-emerging. We took a light, hands-off approach in the wireless arena, and we've seen that sector thrive. So there's always room for things to be done better and for more services to be delivered to more consumers. But I think the nature of the market is such that we're not anywhere really in the country going to see multiple cable providers, multiple telecom providers, multiple wireless providers. We might not have 15 competitors in an area. It doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint. I think we're going to have, somewhat of a more concentrated market structure than you might in, the market for restaurants or grocery stores.
And do you think that there could be a situation where there is an opportunity to be part of the net and emerge as a major provider, because there could be situations placed on somebody? In other words, a company that's trying to emerge. There's that constant struggle between the ones that are emerging and the ones that exist. And the ones that are struggling to be number one or number two are always feeling that they're going to have constraints put on them. And I've thought that when we're talking about net neutrality, we're all worried about your songwriter, so you made your point, don't worry. But aside from that issue, I do think that there's a lot of concern that the current telecom companies are a challenge to the future. Right now, there's no problem, so people worry about the future. And so the idea of just making sure that things are as they are is what I think people are trying to say. Now, maybe the project is wrong, the process is wrong, I don't know. But that's the fear.
Well, and you know, I would be the first to be out there. I'm a huge proponent of the First Amendment. I'd be the first to be out there if I ever felt that my, you know, speech was being restricted, if I was not able to access, you know, websites of my choice. I would have that concern. So I can sort of understand in a vacuum, and I think the approach would be, and one of the speakers addressed this, would be to deal with issues and disputes and problems as they arise, sort of ex post. The problem with sort of trying to anticipate and deal with that is the situation changes on a daily basis with all the innovation, new technologies. You know, I think the music industry tried to do that initially, and digital rights management became this huge issue. I mean, it's just hard to sort of plan and map everything out. So I think being vigilant and always keeping an eye open for abuses is a very good thing. But I think putting a lot of rules and regulations out there is a tough situation. It creates an uncertain environment. And I'll tell you, coming here, I mean, I was a staffer in the Florida legislature, and I had to check on the form, do I support or oppose? And you never want to oppose something that a government body is doing. But I'll tell you, I think, sort of unchecked, this whole net neutrality discussion really is a threat to consumer welfare when we're talking about these new broadband technologies. I will tell you straight out, my personal preference would be if at some point in time in congestion in the network, a network owner has to make a choice between prioritizing for a few seconds my stepfather's remote telemedicine monitoring situation versus somebody else's download of lawful music or video. Choose that application. And I just think that's the reality we're going to be in. No matter how big the pipe, no matter how much bandwidth, we're always going to be at capacity because there are going to be these great folks who've been in the room with their business plan coming up with new content and applications that will eat up that capacity. You know, networks have to be managed for security purposes, for traffic congestion, for jitter, for these new applications. And I think we have to give a good hard look to what are those areas and applications that realistically we're going to have to make sure are prioritized. Emergency operations, that's an easy one. Everyone would say do you prioritize an emergency application or a BitTorrent simultaneous download of lots of videos? Will you prioritize the emergency? Yeah,
in this city, the emergency is in a completely different spectrum, so it's okay. Don't worry about that.
But that's, that's probably more than you needed to hear, but those are my thoughts on the question.
I appreciate it, and I want to thank this panel very much, and we will be in touch. Thank you.